Our scripture text is found in Matthew 2. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said, "but this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd for my people, Israel." Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. We remember these magi mainly for the gifts that they presented to the infant Jesus. We are moved by the fact that they traveled so far to deliver their presents. We are inspired by the fact that they presented valuable gifts, perhaps the very best that they could offer to the newborn king. We think of our Christmas gift giving as being inspired by the gifts of the Magi. There is no doubt that they did offer fine gifts. There is no doubt that their gift giving is inspiring to us still. The gifts of the Magi were given, however, in response to a gift that they had received. They gave because they had been given to. They gave their gifts because God had shown them a star which they followed to the Christ child. Can we even begin to imagine what an astounding gift that was? The Magi were astrologers, likely from the area of modern-day Iraq or Iran. They spent most of their time gazing at the stars. And out of all the stars in which they could have focused, God led them to see the one that would lead them to Jesus. It's awe-inspiring. Think about it. How many stars are there in the universe? The number is larger than a simple mind like ours can comprehend. Just to get some idea of the kind of number we're talking about, think about this. It has been said that there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches of our world combined. All of those stars out there, these men had the tools of their day to look at the stars. And they found this one star that intrigued them enough to keep watch of it and to follow it. with their gifts. No wonder when we look at the night sky, the vastness of it all amazes us. When we do such stargazing, we are seeing only a tiny fraction of our own solar system, which is in turn only a tiny fraction of the whole universe. No wonder that we can so readily echo the words of the Psalms. When I consider the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him? And yet, out of that vastness, God directed the Magi to the one star that made all the difference. We may have lost sight of how astounding this event is in terms of its implications for us. I fear that we lose something if we lose sight of the wonder of the truth that whosoever means each of us individually, each and every one of us, and each and every person on the other side of these doors. The astounding thing about the revelation to the wise men is that they were Gentiles. According to the gospel, the first announcement of the birth of the Messiah was to the Jewish shepherds, men who lived on the fringe of the Hebrew society. The second announcement was to Gentiles, people who lived outside of that society completely. And we are Gentiles. The announcement to them was a first announcement to people like us. John Wesley called the Magi the first fruits of the Gentiles. Even though it was always God's intention for the Hebrews to be a light to the nations and for Gentiles to be included in his kingdom, it took the coming of Jesus as the Messiah to throw the way for us wide open. Even then, it was a hard sell. It took much debate and heroic efforts of people like Paul to make full Gentile inclusion in the church a reality. But God's truth did win out. Salvation is by grace of God through faith in Jesus Christ and nothing else. We come in from different backgrounds, but we all come in the same way, through Christ. God went to the extreme of extremes to make salvation possible for people like us, those who were outsiders. We will gain something very valuable here at the beginning of this new year if we reclaim the truth that the salvation of people like us, of someone like you or someone like me, is a gift from God. We may have lost sight of just how astounding this episode of the Christ event was for everyone. God went to great lengths to let the Magi know about the birth of Jesus. He went to great lengths because what he was saying to the Magi was that he wanted to say to the whole world. His sign to the Magi signaled from the very beginning that God's gift of his Son was not for just a select few, but it was for everybody. The revelation of God to the Magi was an eye-opening experience for those wise men, no doubt, but the revelation to the early readers of Matthew's Gospel was just as much of an eye-opening experience. After all, the Magi were foreigners. They were practitioners of a different religion, and they were astrologers. They bore characteristic after characteristic that should have, the people in Israel would have thought, should have disqualified them from having a positive experience with the Messiah. And yet God showed them the star. They saw the star, and then they followed the star. They were Gentiles, and yet God gave them the gift of his Son. Jesus came for them just as much as he came for the people of Israel. We will gain something very valuable here at the beginning of this new year if we reclaim the gospel truth that the coming of Christ means that the walls have come crashing down, that the door is open to all, and that the church to be gathered around Christ will be a church that makes no distinctions because of race, gender, or social standing. And that's hope. Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical South Pacific has long been a favorite for many and continues to be even today, nearly 50 years after the end of World War II. In the play, Nellie Fawbush from Little Rock, Arkansas, falls in love with a French painter, Emile. The two are discussing the war. "Is it the end of the world?" she cried. "Maybe it's the end of some worlds," he replied. Nellie, gathering herself, declared, "Well, I just can't feel like that. It's a terrible time, but I don't believe it's the end." Her friends at the hospital where she worked thought she was naive, and so gave her the nickname Knucklehead Nellie. Later she thinks, "People think I'm a cockney optimist. I can see the sun and forget every cloud I've ever seen." The last line of the song is, "I'm stuck like a dope with a thing called hope, and I can't get it out of my heart." I hope you can't get hope out of your heart either. Not because I believe in shallow optimism, but because I trust in the grace of God. I disagree with Nellie's view of hope. Hope isn't something that we're stuck with. Hope is something that we choose. At times it may become unstuck, but when it does, we can choose to hope again. We will disagree with the writer of Ecclesiastes that there is nothing new under the sun. There is something new, the renewal of life. We don't always take advantage of the gifts that are given to us. When the wise men came to Herod's court at Jerusalem and inquired as to where the king of the Jews was to be born, the priests and the scribes knew the answer because they knew their scriptures. He was to be born in Bethlehem. So the wise men headed off to Bethlehem, which is only 6 miles from Jerusalem. Do you know who didn't go? The priests and the scribes didn't go with the wise men. This was their history, their prophecy, but they didn't go. The 3 kings had only a rumor to go by, but it moved them to make that long journey. The scribes were much better informed, much better versed. They sat and they studied the scriptures, but it did not make them move. Who had more of the truth? The 3 kings who followed a rumor, or the scribes who remained sitting with all of their knowledge? It makes me wonder about us. God has given us tremendous gifts. God has given us salvation. He has included people like us in his great plan of salvation. He's included me and each one of you. God has given us Christian fellowship, Bibles, a free country in which to exercise our faith, and so much more. How are we responding to his tremendous gifts to us? A poet put it this way: "What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what can I give him? I give him my heart." But today, are we really giving him our hearts? Are we really giving him our lives? Kierkegaard said, "What an atrocious self-contradiction that the scribe should have knowledge and yet remain still. This is as bad as a person knows all about Christ and his teachings, and his own life expresses the opposite." The early Jewish Christians had a hard time accepting the fact that God wanted Jews and Gentiles in his church on the same terms. Now the church is basically a Gentile church, at least where we live. Are we ready to accept the fact that God welcomes all into his family? We withhold a large part of our greatest gift, our lives, from God if we withhold our hearts from anyone. And what a gift we cost ourselves if we don't accept God's gift of that great, multifaceted collection of people who can and should make up his church. Many years ago, the actress who played the mother on the television series 8 is Enough died, and her death was written into the storyline of the show. In one episode, the family members began to find Christmas presents hidden around the house that she had acquired for each of them. Each gift was a reminder of her love for them. We are surrounded by people for whom God has the great gift of salvation and who would be a great gift of God to us. They are hiding in plain sight all around us. As we find them, love them, and relate to them, we will be reminded of God's love for them and for us. What a gift that will be. May the majesty and the power and the glory of our great God go with you, sons and daughters of God. Be strengthened these days to live faithfully for the sake of the kingdom, and let us rejoice. Amen.